Here are the writing tips you need to learn how to write and how to world build the history of your fictional world and create an immersive story your reader will never escape. Join me on the journey toward world building my own story, as well as providing you, yes you, with all the writing tips you need to make your story and characters stand out from all the rest. What is up, you muffin munching muggles? Welcome to Fiction and Reality, where we help you, yes you, become the most devilishly gifted human that you know you are and that you knew you always could be. Big ups on history and in my ute.
Kick up the you. Man, know that I kick up the you.
Now I know what you're thinking. Didn't you just make a video about exploring different mediums of lore? And that I say good eye, young sir. However, your foppish cow-handed wood grubbing and all your blunderbuss must understand that history isn't the same as lore. What? We're talking tomato potato here, not tomato tomato. Anyway, lore is the cultural knowledge, myths, traditions, and beliefs of your fictional world, often a mix of truth, exaggeration, and imagination passed down throughout generations. If you remember the video Undertaking Mechanisms of Lore, this would essentially be akin to the poneglyphs in One Piece, which are essentially cogs of prophecy that foresee the events of the future and relay the legends of both past and present to be fulfilled. You know, the artifact that Bullybeard wrote up on Law to Boot Gang, and with his old reliable trimmer crush to boot, applying that pressure and leaving the hard pirates in shambles. Now, what does history in your fictional world entail, contrary to the definition of lore? History is the recorded or remembered events of the fictional world's past. These are things that within the world actually happen, at least according to chronicles or other primary records. In other words, the concrete, verifiable, and objective recording of events within your story from origin to present time. Of course, your approach when weaving history into plot can vary, such as in One Piece. We all know that the verifiable history of the world presented by the world government is missing about 800 years worth of knowledge and may not be the most accurate portrayal of events of history due to a certain being. And I mean, when you got hitters like this, who exactly is going to muster the kahunas to ask the almighty Emu and his legion of destructive disables to cough up the details? Boom. Understand that history is the innate rolling script of the remembered or recorded events that actually happen within your story, but maintains the capacity to evolve into a fluid entity should the plot require or unveil that such records operate on the foundation of a fabricated legend or tale, or is without amassing the substance needed to construct the holistic and complete picture of said history, to skew perspective for one party's desired outcome. History deals in what happened, while lore deals in what's remembered or believed, and when the facts get twisted, erased, or rewritten, history can slide right into lore's territory. Hey, everyone's got an origin story, right? Whether or not the history of that origin is bleached, of course, is a different question, but presuming these facts are true, where do you start? If your story is charged by a unique systemic power system that threads into the socio-economic structures of class within your fantasy or fictional world, you'll need a story for how they came to be. Maybe that veers your minds towards one sort of recorded cosmic event that occurred 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago, sort of like the gradual step-up game mutations in My Hero Academia, adorning the vast majority of population with a unique quirk of their own, which started with the first reports of a glowing baby. Of course, there's exceptions with who receives these gene mutations and who doesn't. Perhaps start spreading out your timeline of events and mapping these inciting events related to the present time. Are we talking like 300 BC, before Karens?
We're to fucking Zimbabwe, you stupid little pen! Get away from here!
Or is the event proximal to the time in which the current story is taking place, and the events of that current plot are directly arcing from the events of the present? This is honestly where you can sort of rev up your own creative ingenuity. Other than a cosmic event, perhaps consider a legendary figure who ascends into the record and somehow is responsible for setting the events into motion, or through their actions, triumph, or defeat, create the conditions for your plot to thrive, such as with Isildur from Lord of the Rings, who yoked the ring from Sauron's hand and failed to cast the ring into the fire, having been swayed by its power. If you're thinking about a dystopian fantasy type beat, perhaps consider plague or vast infectious diseases such as with I Am Legend, or perhaps the vision of a technological advancement gone wrong, which in turn sets the timeline of factual events for which the present world maintains consistency. The origin of your world's history are the bedrock on which every recorded event stands. They mark the first entries in the timeline, the definitive once upon a time that shapes politics, power systems, and cultural memory for centuries to come. Get this foundation right, and every historical record your characters encounter will feel like it flows naturally from that very first spark. One may consider it exponentially more integral to determine how the relationships, actions, and decision of these individuals or populations shaped a history map of your fictional world as it now stands. Sort of like in Naruto. Like in Naruto. The Senju and Uchiha were conjoined in the founding of the village hidden in the hands and ensured they didn't pull any punches or hesitate to retaliate for the death of their own comrades. The two biggest figures in this era of the shinobi world, of course, would be Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha, who carved out the map of Konoha, or the Hidden Leaf Village. Additionally, consider the notoriety of certain classes within your world and how the history of that class explains its positioning in the socioeconomic totem pole, just like the clans in Naruto. If we remember the history of Madara Uchiha, he sort of left a bad stain. The history of the Uchiha and Senju bouts often led to this sort of prejudiced outlook of the Uchiha clan, even leading to them being cast away within the actual village itself, simply from the history of not being able to trust the Uchiha. A history of fear due to their visual prowess and power to control things. Of course, you have to remember that certain discoveries or inventions or archetypes of magic can sow a rift in power structure, and if one faction or individual tracking through history decides to latch onto that structure solo or keep it within the confines of its inner network, then that disparity in power structure can ripple through the following generations. In Final Fantasy VII, Shinra Electric Power Company's control over Mako energy reshapes the planet's economy, politics, and military landscape. Because they kept that technology in-house, they maintained near absolute control over the world's power structure until outside forces like Avalanche disrupts it. Earth-fissuring discovery, monumental figures enhance their fictional work. The alliances, rivalries, and monopolies that manifest by proxy set the stage for every future conflict, and their influence echoes long after they're gone. When you define these origins with clarity and intentionality, you're not just telling your audience what happened, you're showing them why the present day of your story could never have been unfolded in any other way. Now, you may want to consider the history behind the rise or fall of an empire to serve as a reference point for the present events of your story's plot, which may prove extremely relevant if core settings within your story include broken or failed empires, a spark of rebellion to restore a specific balance of orders. The record for how this all came to be is, of course, refined and measured by the history leading to such circumstances. Let's think about reasons for decline, which could entail the plague, like we mentioned, rebellion, or, of course, corruption.
Do it.
You like mayonnaise on your burger?
Execute Order 66.
You're not investing in meme coin?
Execute Order 66.
Of course, the Jedi Republic was decimated and all but failed in the Revenge of the Sith due to this underlying corruption of Chancellor Palpatine, or should I say Darth Sidious. A series of methodical planning, including the implantation of a brain chip into the heads of the clone army, allowed Darth Sidious orders to override the Jedi and led to the Great Jedi Purge. These events essentially serve as a historical timeline and lay the foundation for Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, and Luke Skywalker's venture trudging forth from the prequel trilogy and setting the groundwork for themes of rebellion and resistance. Broken statues, abandoned cities, and whispered legends left behind aren't just scenery, they're constant reminders of what was gained, lost, and perhaps could be reclaimed, bolstered by the historical timeline of events that precede them. Empires don't just die quietly, they leave a trail for those who come after that feeds the plot of the present and keeps the momentum of your story pumping and pressing forward. For those who come after. Of course, when sculpting the history of your fictional work, you should consider how the past shapes the present events. But here's where things can get a little bit mickey. When assessing the status of history relative to the present, it's imperative to home in on which historical events are still remembered, which are honored, and which are feared. As many of us know, King Fritz wiped out the memories of the Eldians and sold them a haven of isolation and peace from which, within the walls, they could achieve, or thought they could achieve, and created a false history where humanity outside of the walls was believed to be extinct. We see the consequence of Eldians in the present questioning the validity of the false history, such as with Erwin Smith, whose childhood adventure was as a scout became consumed with the obsession of uncovering the true history of Eldia after his father was killed for branching away from the internal narrative of the royal family. The expungement of history cycles and the consequences that sprout from seeking it create a history to fear and reduce the incentive to seek out the validity of the history of the present. Thus, we see this voracious and relentless rebellion against being recused to arrogance flicker alive in Erwin's charge. The similar mechanism of using history to drive forward the plot is almost parallel in One Piece with the erasure of 100 years of history by the world government, and of course the consequences that arise from challenging the established narrative. As we know, he who is embellished as the highest authority and triumphs in war also controls history, or at least may attempt to manufacture, distort, or even erase fragments of history to benefit from a narrative that further reinforces and bolsters their stay of power. This is a cyclical relationship between the historical timeline of your story, the present power structure in play, and how history, or the lack thereof, charges those present with the obligation to either question, fear, or challenge the narrative as a whole, thus leading to a shift of the story's apparatus. The history you craft for your fictional world is not just a backdrop, it is an active force shaping every faction, every character motivation, and every political tension in the present. Whether it's concealed truth, manufactured legends, or erased eras, the manipulation of history becomes both a weapon and a weakness for those in power. By weaving this interplay between past and present in your story, you can not only enrich the depth of your world, but also create a living, breathing tension. One where the truth, if uncovered, can dismantle empires, ignite rebellions, and redefine the very identity of the societies within your narrative. If you took something from this video, anything, I want you to take a moment to crack that subscribe button below and like the video. Like the video. It pushes these videos out so that others can take the key tokens that you gain, so do your fellow comrades a favor. I want to thank you all again for 600 subscribers and all the love and support shown along the way. I've seen some people expressing interest in joining the Discord, so I'll have those links fixed by the end of the day. If you have any video ideas you want to see from me, go ahead and drop them below, or any other ideas you want to see in general. We're always open to introducing new ideas into the old fiction and reality camp. The direction of progress is forward, and it's only up from here. I'll leave a link to my socials in the description below. If you want more info on how to improve your story, feel free to check out some of my other videos by clicking right here. Writers, world builders, and storytellers aiming to perfect writing techniques and enhance their storytelling and world building are all welcome. And with that, remember, if ever you're lost in the forest of your words, strip your mind from fantasy and look to the window of the world, and there your mind will run free.